Mhm.
And can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I've been trying to mute.
There we go.
Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay. So our presentation is called Helping Hands. My name is Gary Wood. Oh, I thought everybody was going to introduce themselves. Okay.
Sorry, Gary. Hi, Gary. Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Villarose.
I'm sorry, I can't seem to get my.
This is Brenda Simeu. Thank you.
Hey, Brenda.
And Lonnie Worsley.
There's Lonnie.
Our introduction. Sticker Shot to in an organization that would not stick together is about Judy Thorson, an executive director of Helping Hands Thrift Store, a nonprofit organization. Judy notices Chris Williams, the store manager of the thrift stores, runs his department as an independent silo from the rest of the company, which has caused concerns with employees and the board. Due to this misalignment with the department, Judy hired an external consultant to assist her with solving the problems at the nonprofits. During our analysis, we also identified key stakeholders during this case study. And the primary stakeholders were, of course, the executive director, Judy Thorson, the board of the nonprofit Helping Hands, and employees such as Erwin, Christopher, and the employees at the thrift store as well, who feel kind of distant from the rest of the organization. Our secondary stakeholders were, of course, the customers that the nonprofit serves, the funders for the nonprofit, future employees, community partners, and we also thought a secondary stakeholder was the consultant who has put the time and effort in to figure out this organization's problems and concerns. And also, they will play an important role if the nonprofit decides to take the report and actually implement it for the organization. They could be kind of a liaison on how to manage and implement that plan as well.
So our initial problem that we found as a group was that there is a cultural difference or division between the thrift store and the Helping Hands organization as a whole. Helping Hands has been small enough that they have been able to operate in a family-like culture. It's friendly, family-oriented, and their employees have remained loyal to the company. They've been able to function without standard policies or procedures, and that's pretty much kept them afloat. Now, the thrift store, on the other hand, they have employees who have complained of a culture of fear and receiving a lot of pressure from their manager, Chris. He has not allowed other employees to assist in the decision making of the company or the store. He's making them feel unfairly treated, and they are becoming resentful towards the company. This is causing the negativity to spread around throughout the employees of their department. Now, Helping Hands is working towards the goal of being innovative and planning for long-term stability. They recognize that the thrift store's profits are essential to Helping Hands' endurance to provide assistance to their clientele, continued assistance to their clientele. Helping Hands wants to keep their customers happy. They want to keep their customers loyal, and that's the priority that they're working towards. Now the thrift store, well, essentially Chris, he's continuing to keep prices high. Although he may be getting quick profits in for the company, he is producing what they have quoted as sticker shock to the customers, where they see the high prices on items, no matter their quality, and it may lead to customers discontinuing to patronize at the thrift store. So Chris may be getting sales, but he's not setting up the thrift store to sustain long-lasting revenue and sustain the organization's future. Our secondary problems are that there's been minimal supervision of Chris, the manager. Since the thrift store's birth, Chris has been the manager, and not only has the physical separation, but the lack of that supervision from his managers has allowed Chris to run the place as he sees fit. Although the thrift store and Helping Hands are now physically together, there's still a sense of separation between the thrift store and the organization itself. They're not considered a part of the team. One of the problems that Chris has been asked to resolve is connecting the two. And employees still feel that they are not connected, but Chris feels like this is a problem that he has solved. And these patterns are kind of speaking to Chris's issues of control. The board has been receiving numerous complaints about the pricing of the product, and the employees, even employees of equal rank, the managers and the board have not been able to get negotiations done with Chris on pricing. He's still reluctant and non-receptive, and shortly receptive of any suggestions made. He continues to return back to his philosophy of price gouging and discontinuing or making discounts whenever he feels like it. Now, because Judy has been stretched in her duties as an executive director, Erin is in her new position as assistant director, none of them have put their foot down to demand Chris to operate under the mission or vision of Helping Hands. Instead, they continue to allow Chris to have his sense of power and control and his ability to revert back to his own sentiments each time a decision is made. So in conclusion of our perceived problems, Judy and Erin's leadership style has major issues that are contributing to the division and the miscommunication between the thrift store and Helping Hands as an organization.
Thanks, Lonnie. We identified some potential losses with this case study as well. The first thing that we thought about was employee engagement. Ineffective leadership can result to disengaged employees, leading to less motivation and contribution to the organization. As you clearly see when it pertains to those employees that work with Chris, that work under Chris, that they were more engaged. They were more engaged when Chris left the store when he was on vacation versus while he was there. Taking the opportunity to be more innovative, creating a sign to let people know how many people that they have affected, how many people they reach with the thrift store, and then when Chris comes back, they move the sign. Also, another potential loss would be productivity. A clear lack of direction from leadership can lead to a decrease in employees' productivity, and efficiency. Financial performance is something that we thought about as well, as ineffective leadership can learn to poor financial decisions, decrease income, and financial losses. As you see that with the sticker shock incident, people are coming in seeing beat up items for high prices, and the company is losing money due to that. And finally, we want to touch on the company culture. A culture environment lacking leadership structure can make it challenging to maintain a positive work environment and keep employees motivated. As we clearly see, the two separate silos of helping hands are kind of clashing now because Judy is trying to get everyone back together, and we have so many different personalities and two different cultures that it's not as simple as having a meeting and we all kumbaya. It's some real barriers that we have to break in order for helping hands to run as a unit. And so these are the potential losses that we came to determine with our case study.
So as we talk about solutions and implementation, this case study really focuses on understanding the importance of interconnectedness in an organization, how that culture, how those policies, how our supervisors manage those policies. This is a great example of what happens when those things aren't in place. And so we had a lot of really good discussion about how to implement some of these solutions and what we felt would be the best roadmap. So the first thing I think, needs to happen in this particular organization, we've talked about there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the employees. There is a lot of misalignment in terms of understanding the culture. And so the first thing we felt that needed to happen was, as a consultant, we need to review the current structure of the entire organization. We need to take a deep dive. We've talked about this many times in classes that we've got to listen and listen to hear from the employees and from the people that work in the organization and know the heartbeat of the organization. And before any changes are made, we need to listen to understand what exactly is going on. And so with that, we're suggesting that we hold focus groups for each area and helping hands. Yes, helping hands is the overall organization, but there are multiple pieces that fall within that, just like any other organization. And each of those areas has a particular role in the organization. And so understanding their perceptions about what helping hands is, what their role is with helping hands, good things that are going on, things that need improvement is a huge first step in terms of making any recommendations. Then we're suggesting that we need to compile a report. So we need to take our own review of the current structure. We need to take the information that we received from the focus groups, and we need to report that to the board and to Judy. We need to share, this is what we have seen, this is what we have heard, and this is what we are recommending. And so we know one of the first things that needs to happen is Judy really needs her own roadmap to be successful in her role. She needs some support in terms of perhaps some leadership development in her particular role. And she also needs some support in how to carry out the mission of Helping Hands and how to celebrate that mission with her employees. But she also has to have an accountability piece with that. So she needs to know and understand that it's her role and job to uphold the mission of Helping Hands, but also to hold her employees accountable. And when they're not doing what she needs them to do or what the organization needs, then she has to make sure that she's making the decisions to hold those people accountable. And so with that, one of the first things that she's going to need to do is create a personal development plan for Chris. Now, we could go back and forth and have some really good discussion about this. Do we throw the baby out with the bathwater and Judy and Chris just go, right? Or Chris goes. And we had a lot of discussion, and I think we could continue to have discussion about that. But I think we felt that there was so much misalignment and a lot happening in terms of people not holding each other accountable, that we really needed to start over and give Judy and Chris a chance first. And so we are giving Chris very clear personal development plan of what he needs to do in order to be successful. And there is going to be clear action items with that, with deadlines, timelines. And if they are not met, then there will be next steps that will take place to include termination. So very clear. Even in Judy's roadmap, her plan for success for the organization, that's clear. But with Chris, it's going to be very clear. Here are the things that you need to do to be successful. And if they are not done, this is what will happen. And we are recommending a 30-day check-in to see what's going on, to see if those things have been achieved. And also being realistic, we're not going to set Chris up for failure, that we really do want Helping Hands and Chris to succeed. So we're going to put together attainable goals. Other solutions. So Gary, if you want to switch to the next slide. Thank you. So Erin also needs some support. She's taken on this new role within the organization, and she too also needs a roadmap for success. And when I say roadmap for success, I think we're really talking about what are her goals in her role to help the organization be successful. And so all of those will align with the mission of Helping Hands, and will give her some additional support to be successful in her role, to include any specific training that she may need, any other support that she may need. The next thing that we felt was really important is that Judy needs to meet with the entire organization as a whole, and she needs to go over transparency. We were just talking about that earlier in the class. She needs to talk about what us as consultants found. She needs to share the report. She needs to be transparent about the findings. She needs to be transparent about some of the failures and things that haven't gone well. But she also needs to be positive about what can come from this moving forward. And with that, it's so important, as we talk about this interconnectedness and understanding culture, that everybody in the organization has to have buy-in as to what is Helping Hands, what is our mission, why are we here, and how do each of us play a role in that. And that starts with being really transparent about that mission and allowing for everyone around the table in the organization to have a part in that, to give feedback on that mission, to give feedback on the goals of what Helping Hands should be doing and can be doing, and ultimately allow for that better understanding of what the organization is about. Obviously, we need clear policies from human resources that need to be shared in a staff handbook. A lot of what we saw throughout this was policies that were created, but only followed by some. And so there needs to be clear policies that are written for staff members in the organization, but there also needs to be accountability. And so Judy, Erin, and Chris have to make sure that they are holding people accountable. Judy needs to be holding Chris and Erin accountable. Erin and Chris need to be holding each other accountable. They need to be holding their staffs accountable. And there has to be ways for their staff to be able to report to HR when they are concerned that there are things going on in the organization that they have concerns about. And then finally, we said it's really important that we create professional development opportunities for all to support growth. This is so important. I was referring back to our book on chapter 4 when we were talking about learning and perception, and really making sure that the organization, the staff within the organization, has the right environment for them to be able to learn, that they have a support system to be able to learn. And I think ultimately the biggest piece about what has happened here is that Helping Hands has gone away from their mission. And so they really need to refocus, restructure, regroup, and have everyone in that organization meet and understand what is their purpose, what is their point, and be able to learn and grow from that.
Thank you, Leslie. I'll pick from there. Colleagues, when we were going through this case study, it was such an interesting case study, and we all noted that the organization was dysfunctional. And we had to discuss in detail on what were the risk implications if these issues were not going to be sorted out quickly. Because when you look at the structure of the organization, there was basically a lot of gaps that needed to be quickly handled. And so we noted that one of the risks was the malfunctioning organizational structure that was supposed to be quickly sorted out because there was poor organizational performance, culture, and strategy. When you look at the structure, apparently everyone was on his own. There was no leader in this organization, as much as they were able to. They had a vision, but it was not basically being implemented. And so we also looked at the organization not having the structure in place will not help in terms of the executive directors, because when you look at Judy, you look at Aileen, you look at Chris, they are all in top management. So it becomes a very big challenge in terms of assigning duties and also division of labor. And so the employees are left in a limbo because they basically don't know where to report, how to perform their duties. And so it was so critical in our discussion to ensure that the organization structure of Helping Hands is reviewed. And so once it's reviewed, there'll be span of control. Judy will have a grip of of managing the immediate people under her, and also reporting to the board. And we also noted that another risk that the Helping Hands was going to eventually face if these issues were not going to be handled was loss of revenue, because Chris would go an extra notch in increasing the prices of used items. And when the customers walked in, apparently it was a sticker shocker to them because the prices were so high. So what will a customer do if he walks in and finds that your prices are high? He will definitely look for an option of going to another better shop to get these items, probably at a cheaper price. So the risk implication that Helping Hand was going to face if these issues are not sorted out was loss of revenue. When we look at the case study, it was a big issue that necessitated Judy to hire consultants. When these consultants come in, they're not coming to do this work without being paid. They will definitely have to be paid for that period of time. And in the case study, it was very clear that they stayed in the organization for so long. Of course, they didn't say how many months or weeks, but they say that they had stayed in the organization, they did interviews, they did observation, and then they came up with a report that was now supposed to be implemented by management. And for this period of time that the consultants were there, the organization was going to spend so much money to pay them. So that is, of course, a risk of revenue on the side of the organization. When we look at the organization Helping Hands, the choice of the name of the organization is basically supposed to go out and alleviate poverty and ensure that people have homes. And so one of the risks that the organization was going to face was the loss of company value. And when we talk about company value, we are talking about the image, the brand, I mean, the employees. You look at the employees on the ground, these are demotivated workforce. Reason being, the working relationships are strained. And we all know that employees are the engine of the institution. They are the assets of the institution. And if they are demotivated And if the working relationship is strained, then of course performance is going to be low. And so the interpersonal relationship is also poor in this organization. And so at some point, if this continues, you will find out that there is a high staff turnover. And so the organization is going to lose. Remember, many organizations invest, not even many, all organizations invest in terms of recruitment. So then that means if these employees are going to leave, then the recruitment process has to start over again. And it also has implications in terms of time, implications in terms of resources, implications in terms of training, and even onboarding and ensuring that these employees come in and pick the vision of the institution. So one of the risks that we are talking about is the company value of Helping Hands, and it's supposed to be quickly sorted out so that they don't risk or losing their value as a company. We are also talking about instability of the organizational culture. Honestly speaking, when we looked at this case study, the culture of the organization is wanting. And we looked at it and saw that there were no vision and goals to guide staff in achieving the intended purpose. Do they have a strategic plan that they are able to refer to? Do they have strategies in place that they are supposed to look at? Do they have timelines? Do they have assigned tasks that they will look at it, maybe say after 6 months and say, this is what we wanted to achieve. This is what the executive directors, for example, Chris, was supposed to achieve within a specific period of time. And when we look at it, their vision was very clear from the word go. Help people in poverty to manage their finances and help them toward home ownership. But if the organization itself, the people that are working for the organization are not able to help or manage their finances, then there is a question there. There is a gap that has to quickly be sorted out. Then we are also looking at it. Another risk will be resistance to change and creativity. Employees are really trying hard. When Chris was away on vacation for just one day, these employees came out quickly and they wanted to connect with the employees and to tell them, look here, this is what we've been doing for this period of time. But because they knew he was going to come back again and probably hit back on them, they just relayed the information quickly and took it down again. What does it tell us? It tells us that these employees are enthusiastic. They are connecting with the organization, but they're only missing out on a leader. So the question is, do we have authentic leaders in this organization? I mean, I'm looking at these employees, if they can have a back, if they can be pushed a little bit, they're going to push Helping Hands towards attaining its vision. And then basically, another thing that is a risk factor is the work-life balance of the employees. We really empathized with these employees. Despite the fact that they are going through what they are going, their work-life balance is basically affected. And when work-life balance is affected, we're expecting issues to deal with stress. Stress level will go up. They are not able to balance their work life and family. And apparently the organization might end up even spending on medical bills. I mean, if their work-life balance is not able, they are not able to balance it. And so lastly, another risk that this organization will face is a dysfunctional organization leading to shutdown. It is very eminent that looking at what is currently happening at Helping Hands, if these things continue the way they are going to continue, we are looking at a shutdown of Helping Hands, because there is a dysfunctional or a disconnection between the board, a disconnection between the board and the executive directors, and then the executive directors and the employees. And apparently the case study even implies that there are losses of revenue, because the thrift shop was the one that was bringing in resources for the organization. But apparently, because it is being dysfunctional, the organization may end up not having finances to keep it going. So we are looking at a shutdown if these things are not going to be handled as quickly as possible. We move to our conclusion, Gary. So what is our conclusion? For any organization to thrive, like the Helping Hands, we said that their vision was so good in terms of getting the name of the organization, going out and empowering the community, and also empowering the employees. But before they do this, they need to review the organization's vision, goals, strategy, and design to be able to achieve the desired goal of supporting the poor towards home ownership. And based on the implementation plan that Leslie has been able to present to us, we look forward to having better changes in this organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yay. Excellent, excellent, excellent job. This is a Hertzberg study, isn't it? Yeah, this is a straight Hertzberg right here. This is where your theoretical framework comes into disciplined inquiry. What you're learning in your dissertation is what you would do when you go out in the real world. And what you do has to be guided by a theoretical framework. There's a lot of literature. This is a straight Hertzberg study. People are dissatisfied. So let me share my screen. I want to do a couple notes on screen here. Let me see. All right. So nonprofit organizations, let me change this to fully agree. All right. So NPOs. All right. Nonprofit organizations. They have two sides. Now, most businesses are the same way. They just don't acknowledge them as clearly as nonprofits have to do. There is a quantitative side, and there's a qualitative side. All right, the quantitative side of a nonprofit is that thrift store's got to make money, right? But what happens if that becomes the driving force? The qualitative needs of serving people in poverty don't get met. And so nonprofits have this specific I guess I don't want to say cross to bear, but they have this specific duty to make sure that they balance both of these. Now, in for-profit companies, we know which one comes first. But in nonprofits, you have this quantitative, qualitative, where we've got to make enough money, we got enough, bring enough money in to keep the doors open, but we're really about serving people. So you have that. So it goes back to vision, mission. Now, there's some debate in the literature about which comes first, the vision or the mission. For our purposes, when we're doing theoretical work and when we're doing consultancy work, it's very simple. The vision comes first. The vision comes first. The vision is your own as the organization, the leadership. In this case, it was help people in poverty.
Okay. Oh yeah, they smell.
Okay, I'll do that right quick. All right, help people in poverty. All right, so now the mission is, but you can't achieve your mission, your vision without, the mission is carried out by the employees and the clients. If you don't have any clients, you can't carry out your mission. You can't help people if none of them come to your store, and you can't run your store if you don't have any employees. So you have to understand that your vision comes first, but in order to do your mission, you have to make sure that you're meeting the needs of both your employees and your clients. The things that motivate them and the things that dissatisfy them. That's the heart of this study. This is a Hertzberg study. We've got dissatisfied employees with the treatment that they're getting, and we got dissatisfied clients with the prices they're being charged. And so when we start talking about our plan, we have this is the overarching theory that shapes our plan, that we got to understand that we've got to address both of these, the employees and the clients, as you did. And so I love the notion of the focus group for the employees. And I'm glad that you said that one today, because I want to show you what that looks like in real life. But the overarching with this is nonprofits have a specific issue with making sure that they balance the quantitative, how much money we make, with the qualitative, how happy our employees are, how happy our clients are. It's not just how many we serve, it's how well we serve them in nonprofits. Let me say that again. Nonprofits have this particular organizational imperative. I'm gonna say it that way. Organizational imperative, that it's not just how many they serve, but how well they serve them. And so for-profit companies could learn something from that as well. But if your customers aren't satisfied, you can't carry out your vision if you have nobody to do it in terms of employees or clients. So you got to make sure you do that. And y'all covered that really well. And I'm glad that you said focus groups. So in a real sense, as a consultant of somebody who comes in, let me move that out of the way. So what you would do is you would conduct a focus group. And then, of course, you have specific questions for them, and you get this, you use whatever software you can. You can use Otter AI, you can use Zoom if you're doing Zoom, and it'll do a transcript for you. But you get your focus groups and you have specific questions and you talk to them. This is exactly the kind of thing this is what Kendra did in this one. She did a focus group and she asked them these questions about how well they were being served, about some of the issues, problems, barriers, all the things that y'all talked about. This is a real one. This really happened. So this was, focus group 1, she had 9 participants, and that's a little many for, I would prefer to try to keep it at 6, but in the end she had 18. She did 3 focus groups and they weren't evenly split, but normally we would try to keep them at 6, but because of the timing, she did these via Zoom. And it printed out the transcript. Then we take those transcripts, and we talked about that, doing these focus groups and then looking at the results. The problem with that is it's really hard to do that. You got to make sure you do it in a very disciplined way. And so what we do, we feed this into NVivo or another software package, and we do a thematic analysis. And so here's the actual interviews. We changed the names, obviously, because we don't want to do that. But when we report this back, let me go back here. Okay, so we identify the themes. And we have the demographics, communication barriers, emotional and psychological strain, contextual challenges, some parents, additional pressures, sick family, perspective, conclusion. Right here, we don't just do this by hand. We use software packages that tell us what, give us the bottom line on these things. This particular one was dealing with a nonprofit who was delivering a service during COVID. And what was the issues? What were the barriers? All those things. And we were very specific. We were very intentional. This is disciplined inquiry in that focus group. Now, the purpose of this was to give this to the company and say, this is what you've got to do a better job with the clients. And also one of the focus groups was employees. This is what you got to do for the employees. So when you talk about doing focus groups, it's not against the rules to not only do the employees, but the clients as well. Remember, it takes both of them to achieve your mission. That's one of the things that a lot of consultants don't do, is they just get one of the two perspectives. And remember, to achieve our mission, it takes both the clients and the employees to achieve our mission. That's the thing. And we got to know what motivates them or what dissatisfies them. Both of them, not just one. Too many times we just focus on one group or the other. You got to do both. We actually did 3 groups in this one. We did 3 separate focus groups. We did parents, we did employers, we did the organization itself. What about that? They're employees, but we divide them into people who were making the decisions, and then the people who were delivering those decisions. They're different too. They're not the same people. That's not the same group. So we ended up, in order to do a complete analysis of this organization and what they were trying to deliver, we did the actual employees delivering, we did the employees that were in charge and making the decisions, and we did those 9 parents who were getting those services. So your analysis as a consultant has to be very, very thorough and complete. Excellent presentation. Just make sure you understand in all nonprofits, we have the quantitative and the qualitative. In this particular one, Chris was letting the quantitative drive only, and it was hurting the qualitative. What people were getting, the poor people in poverty were not getting decent prices and decent quality products. The people who worked there weren't getting what they needed. The people in supervision, Judy, weren't getting what they needed. It takes, you understanding quantitative, qualitative, but understanding for your vision to occur, to happen, is dependent upon the mission. The mission is the employees, and in this case, there's 2 separate groups of employees, and then the clients. If you're doing focus groups, if you're doing interviews, if you're doing your qualitative work, you must be complete. That's the biggest drawback that I see. Now, what's the biggest drawback to that? We talked about this before, is you maybe not having access. If people, just like the clients, if they're not coming back to your store, how do you talk to them? That's part of your problem. But you can't let that be a deterrent. There's ways to get around that. We can talk about that, but we won't get too deep into that this morning. But again, when you're doing focus groups, that's why it's groups, S, plural, more than one. You can't just look at one of the 3 groups involved in a case like this. You've got to do all 3. As I just showed you, that's what we did with Kendra in her particular one. And it was very much like this. It wasn't a thrift store, but it was delivering a product to people. And they weren't being successful. And we're trying to help them be successful. Excellent. Questions that you have. Can everybody see the Hertzberg connection here of satisfiers, dissatisfiers, things that motivate you, things that demotivate you, that make you stay as a customer or an employee, or things that make you go? And they're different things. In this particular case, I agree 1,000%. We're going to work with Chris on this one. This is an organizational problem. This is not a Chris problem. He's not exhibiting abusive behavior. He's just not understanding what his role is in a nonprofit. This is different than our first one, where the person was exhibiting abusive behavior. You can't keep those people. But in this case, this is simply a dysfunctional organization that doesn't understand the relationship between the vision and the mission. And so that's the disconnect in this one. When we talk about organizations being dysfunctional, that's the number one reason why organizations are dysfunctional. There's a disconnect between what they want to do and then how they do it, the actual delivery, the operational piece of it. We can help them with their operational piece. And we do need an action plan. We do need we need training, we need development. We need that for all the employees, from the board all the way down. One of the things that we've done in some of our dissertations and practice in DEOL is we've done board training of different organizations. I have one of those in Greenville, South Carolina, at a museum. We did board training there. to get the board to understand what their role was in this. And what we found is they were just all over the map and what the vision was. Well, how can we translate that into a mission if you've got 6 people on the board and you've got 6 different visions? So what we had to do was like herding cats, kind of get them all in the same direction of understanding. You got to have a singular vision here before we can translate that into a mission. The conflict arose when the curator brought in an exhibit that they didn't like. Well, you didn't tell her not to. She didn't know. You just told her you wanted her to increase the number of people coming through the door. So she brought in an exhibit that brought a lot of people in. Well, we don't like that exhibit. We don't like them people she brought in either. You need to clearly define your vision then, who you're serving and why. She can't execute your vision, and that would be the mission without her knowing what it is. Have you told her that? Well, no, we didn't tell her that. Well, how was she supposed to know? So therein lies that. But again, straight Hertzberg study. I'm a big Hertzberg fan, as you know. It is the heart of organizations. Without employees, you can't deliver, and without customers, you can't deliver. I'm an operation. I've told you that. I'm a quantitative person, but I do a little qualitative work. But I'm an operations person. How are we going to do it? And that's why I love Hertzberg, because he's all about the operational to delivery side. I try not to think. I hurt the team when I do that. I'm just a doer. I'm not much of a thinker. All right. Excellent job. We're ready for our next group now.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Barry.
I can share my screen, correct?
Yes, I'll stop my video.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right. Once again, good morning. So, of course, we're doing the same case study. It's Darius, Matt, and myself. And so we're going to start with Darius, and he's going to talk about structure, culture, and interconnectedness.
Barry, could you make it green?
Say it again.
If you hit slideshow, I believe at the top, right there beside.
There you go. Okay.
So good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing good.
Good morning, Darius.
Started. So we took a little bit of a different approach. Before I do get started, we took a little bit of a different approach in how we evaluated this case study. We wanted to focus more so on the organizational structure and culture that's already established, show its interconnectedness, and then, of course, get into the problems, so the conflict and the things that we see happening here, kind of like, of course, what you all just described. And then, of course, provide some recommendations and practical things that can kind of fix what we have happening here. So from the organizational structure standpoint, I did recreate the organizational chart that's listed in there with a little bit more of color coding to the functions of the organization and how the thrift store, where we're seeing the issues with Chris and his team, are coming into play, because of course, they're on a different location. They're not physically connected to everybody else, and they seem to have their own thing going up. But also we do see important relationships here. We see board of directors. We see Judy, who's the executive director. We see Aaron, who's just got a promotion and now is governing or overseeing those 4 different areas of the organization. So from the organizational structure standpoint, there is a clear chain of command here. And kind of like what Dr. Lamb was just saying, that this is an organizational issue that, of course, that we're about to go into an approach. And so moving forward, Barry, can you go to the next slide? So we did see reporting relationships, but as it relates to organizational structure, that we read in that particular chapter of our book, that there are a few things when considering organizational structure. If you can go, yep, thank you. So centralization versus decentralization. Centralization, of course, is decision-making that happens more so at the top of the organization, and decentralization is what we read that happens more so at the bottom amongst the team at the lower tiers of an organizational chart. And so here, the way in which, of course, Judy has now hired this expert team to come in and kind of evaluate what's going on, having meetings with the, of course, executive board. Most times in these types of organizations, of course, there's going to be one involved. So decision-making is happening at the top of the organization. So we would therefore, of course, conclude that it is centralization. But however, formalization is not so much so. I did quote where the books wrote and talked about the report noted that most of the departments that help enhance operated according to a clan culture, of course, and an environment that is friendly, family-like, held together by loyalty, but so much so informal that the principles of mutual trust had no standards, policies, or procedures in place. And of course, so formalization on that end, although centralized, formalization was not as a discipline, of course, as we see that it could have been. And so moving along to culture now. Culture, of course, is a clan culture, an environment that is friendly, family-like, held together by loyalty. These people get along. They have shared values in how they foresee the organization moving forward and what should be happening. And so in a clan culture, the most important value is taking care of the employees and making sure that whatever they need is helpful to them to be satisfied. We saw that Daff wrote about that, and we read that in that particular chapter of the book. However, the issue is that we're having is that there's a subculture now in this organizational culture that's different. And so the subculture of the thrift store is completely bureaucratic. Chris, of course, because he's not understanding what's happening, or it doesn't seem that he's understanding what the mission or what's going on. He's been there since its inception. They're now at a remote location. He's doing his own thing, so much so that when they're telling him, hey, we're going to have these particular prices, these type of sales going on, Chris is taking it and doing what he wants to do. So he has this type of bureaucratic culture in the thrift store, which is leading us to having some issues. So we can move forward to the next slide. And so as it relates to culture strength, one of the things that we'll think about throughout the rest of the presentation is, of course, is there agreement among the members about the importance of specific values? Well, I would say yes to some, but it doesn't seem like it's reflective over in the thrift store. So as we get into kind of the conflict and as we get into some of the things, we'll kind of unfold on how maybe there's cultural strength in those parts. Maybe if we're considering cultural strength as a whole, what's the important and specific values and agreement in that among all team members, and maybe how can we get Chris to kind of jump on board? So do we see the frequent use of ceremonies, symbols, and stories and sayings that express key values? Have managers align structures and processes that support these cultural values? And so the book talked about some power relationships. I believe it was in the chapter about organizational, well, it had to be culture, but Judy, this is a person. Power relationships are people that are considered to have kind of like influence or manipulation and how things get done. And so I highlighted Judy here because, of course, she's the director. She has the influence to bring in somebody, an expert. She has the influence to meet and kind of set forth a plan and work between the board of directors and the team to kind of get things going and, you know, move the company or organization along. But of course, we also see another power relationship is Chris. Chris is, like I said, doing what he wants to do. He's been there for a very, very long time, and it's just not connected to what it seems to be the overall functioning and organizational system is in this particular entity. And so as it relates to control system, this is kind of how information is shared. And so we see that this is all happening now, setting the scene that we're in a board meeting. I mean, we're in a meeting. We've just got going over the report in the news, and they're sharing the information. Judy doesn't seem to want to attack it head on, or she doesn't want to come off too much of a way towards Chris, but she's had completely too many issues to the fact that now she cannot really focus on her functions of her role because, like she said in the beginning, she's dealing with people problems all day. And so when you have this type of structure that's in place, there is a hierarchical structure here. There is reporting relationships. There's a chain of command, but this culture that is at this point so informal, but has shared values in how the organization should go forth. Barry, if you go to the next slide, we see that a strength is empowerment and autonomy. So both the clan culture and a decentralized structure empower employees and give them a degree of autonomy in their roles. We have that. The volunteer person can most likely work with volunteers, and everything is feeding back to the overall overall mission of the organization. However, the conflict resolution and consensus building is one of the things that's what we're going to get into now. So in this clan culture, conflicts are often resolved through a discussion because it's so informal, because these people know each other, they have relationships. Consensus building is more informal than it is through a more formal hierarchy. And in decentralized organizations where decision-making is authority distributed, resolving conflicts and reaching consensus is essential for effective operations. But it doesn't seem that we can do that. And so now we'll get into the specific conflict of what's happening here.
Okay, my section is on the conflict. And so the overview of the conflict, there are basically two components. There is the clash of culture, or what Anderson calls the cultural divide. So the primary culture of Helping Hands is family-like. There's a lot of mutuality, there's respect, trust, and one of the prime factors is long-term planning, which has to be the case because the end objective per the company goal is to make sure that they get poverty-stricken people into a place where they can become homeowners. The subculture, which is the thrift store, is dominated by fear, pressure, and short-term results. So we can see that conflict there. The second aspect of the conflict is the clash of management style. Chris's style is more autocratic. People are threatened by his authority. And then the corporate management is more facilitative leadership, whereas the leadership is more about empowering those that work under them. The types of conflict are personal conflict, substantive conflict, and procedural conflict. And the personal conflict aspect of this particular conflict, the personality conflict exists between Judy and Chris. Judy is pretty much passive aggressive. She doesn't tend to like to deal with things head on. And even when they get to the end of the particular case study, you see that Judy is somewhat intimidated by Chris because of his aggressive approach. The substantive conflict is Chris's focus is on the short-term goals rather than the long-term goals as a company. Based upon what we read, it seems that Chris's focus is more on moving merchandise rather than the end goal or the end game, which is to make sure that their clients are in a position, or rather, let me back up, the company's in a position to develop or gain enough revenue so that they can help their clients purchase their homes. And then also Chris has refused to adhere to prescribed pricing objectives that happened before. And then the end, when they gave him 3 denominations, the 25, the 50, and the 75, he chose just to do 1 denomination. And then, of course, there is the procedural conflict. Chris objected to the recommended pricing, and then Chris also objected to the directives regarding the thrift store operations. But also, we can say that the procedural conflict is that there are no policies and procedures, but we will tackle that later on. The sources of conflict are interdependency, which is the level of coordination and synchronization between departments, is how the departments interact, coordinate, and so on. And so, as I stated, the primary source of income for Helping Hands is the thrift store. And so the lack of sales is impacting the corporate objectives, the bottom line, which is funding the support so that the clientele can reach a place where they can buy homes. The thrift store management prefers to work autonomously. Chris prefers to call the shots. He prefers to do things on his own. And part of that is because he has been doing this for 10 years, I believe the book said. And so there is a level of ownership. Now, I would say that this type of conflict, or we decided that this type of conflict was dysfunctional. This type of conflict is detrimental to the organization. Chris's territorialism is innate to the autocratic leadership that we discussed earlier, and it's in direct conflict to the culture of Helping Hands, which is more of a clan culture. And then Chris refused to modify his behavior even after having a meeting with Judy, and he chose to do his own, follow his own standards. Okay, the other cause of conflict, or should I say the causes of conflict, the first cause is structural. This represents a part of that is centralization, the degree to which the control is dispersed. Now, again, the thrift store operated independently, independent of what the rest of the company was doing. And when they talked to the consultant and we met with the different departments, what he noticed was that when they got to the thrift store was existed in a silo to the degree that when they were doing it, they actually did a graphic where the thrift store was circled by itself to signify that it was not necessarily, there was this unspoken rule or this unspoken understanding that they existed by themselves. And the manager, Chris, managed the store as if, again, it was a separate entity. Okay, also another structural cause of conflict was the physical layout. Prior to this new ideal that they were working on, the company or the thrift store was in a place by itself, but they moved the facility so that they were all together. So the management of the thrift store did not change even after that relocation, because the physical layout really does matter. But before the physical layout can change, there has to be a change of mindset. So the individual causes, again, of the conflict were goals. They were competing goals. Again, the thrift store was more short-term, and the organization focused on long-term goals. Another source of conflict was historical conflict. The past performance, which is the probability of repeated occurrences. As I said earlier, Chris did not comply, who was the manager of the thrift store. He did not comply with price changes. And so even after meeting with them the second time, he did not comply with price changes. So that's a historical cause of the conflict. There are 5 outcomes of conflict. There's the win-lose, there's the win-lose, there's the lose-lose, there's the win-lose, or the lose and win, there's compromise and win-win. Now, the objective, or should I say the outcome that we projected was win-lose. And so we're going to go to the third part of the presentation now.
All right. So we are going to focus in on integrating systems across the organization, which is the goal that we were hired for. Barry, you might go to the next slide. So in looking at the goal of interconnected organizational strategy, we chose to begin working with the board of directors to create a standard operating procedure for dismissal of an employee, specifically Chris. We chose not to keep Chris specifically because of both his past conflicts and his present interactions that were noted in a case study. You know, although that we can help change Chris's attitude, we felt like it would be much more difficult to impact his personality, and his personality conflicts with the mission of this organization. So some of the deliverables that we wanted to provide to Helping Hands was to help create a new organizational structure, to create that decentralization. And what we're recommending is using a cross-functional grouping. The cross-functional grouping would help with the core processes, rather than focusing on core processes within the organization rather than simply tasks, and focusing on that quality of life for the employees and the individuals who need the financial guidance. So we would direct our attention of this structure would direct the attention of all the employees towards the thrift store and the value of the volunteers. And also it would give our employees a broader view of the organizational goals to assist people in assisting people in poverty. This process gives responsibility to all the employees around those core processes. And then people on the teams are given the skills, tools, and motivation to make decisions related to the team's performance. We felt that one of these specific motivators that does tie to the Hertzberg model is responsibility. And so by giving all the employees responsibility, we are creating motivation within the organization. And we felt as though This would help promote that focus on teamwork, collaboration, leadership, both between the warehouse and the store, really trying to interconnect all of these systems. And then ultimately improve the quality of life for the employees by offering them opportunities for that shared responsibility and then that accountability of the outcomes. So what we're recommending is, again, is that cross-functional grouping. And so what we have done is really try to flatten the organization more to have that shared responsibility across departments. And so we are, we've organized it in a way where there's a lot of connection across departments through, as well for finance, as well as resource development, client services, volunteers, and also community relations. We even looked at, even though we want all of those connected to that warehouse manager as well as the store manager. What you'll see here is really the position that Chris held as being removed. And what we're putting in place is a new position as a full-time integrator. This was recommended as a way to create the linkage through cross-functional organization, through this organizational structure. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that position next. So by creating a full-time integrator, we're able to connect the organizational strategy across the groups and departments. This will also create, allow us to utilize that Hertzberg model because it balances also the hygiene and also the motivator factors. Hygiene being the working conditions, in order to prove the working conditions for our employees, and also focus in on those interpersonal relationships as well. And so for that full-time integrator, there'd be responsibilities to be creating that innovation and coordination between the warehouse and the thrift store, connecting departments to all of our coordinators with site managers, focusing on that collaboration to build the trust with employees so that we have those interpersonal relationships being established and those working conditions being improved. Being able to resolve those disputes between the warehouse and store interests. And then this person would also report directly to the executive director. Next, one of the other interventions that we are recommending is some research and implementation of a cross-functional information system. Communication seems to be across the organization is important. And so we are recommending either called a computerized information system or some type of customer relationship management. What this would do, it would integrate the communication across the organization. It would also create this cohesive management of the resources of the organization, and resources being our volunteers, as well as employees and the people that we serve who are impoverished. And it also will help us to meet both those qualitative and quantitative measures that we're seeking to improve. So by enabling coordinators and site managers to routinely exchange information, both for problems, opportunities, activities, and decisions, we feel this would also build relationships across the organization and continue to support that horizontal linkage for both communication and collaboration. So this is just a quick video. I did a little bit of research. We did a little bit of research on these resource management, communication resource management systems. And we're just going to show you a small little clip. Salesforce does have some products related specifically to nonprofits. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of how that works. So without the audio, that's okay. We'll just keep listening to it here. What it really shows is that we're making connections across the organization, both from perspective, those who might be in need of help, also with our volunteers. And so you can see where all those different systems start to come together. So I'm just, you can stop it there. So the purpose of showing that is really to show the linkage, right? And so there are systems out there for for nonprofit organizations that can help this organization grow over time. The next thing that we are recommending is establishing some policies and procedures for organizational behavior. We really felt like the ethics component within the organization needed to be addressed. And so some of the recommendations for creating those policies and procedures is to start by creating some mechanisms for building more consistency across ethical behavior across the organization. So we would create an ethics committee that would involve really the coordinators and executive director who oversee the company's ethics. And then they would be charged with developing a code of ethics, which would include a formal statement of the company's values and social responsibilities. And then also developing a system of disclosure. One of the things that we saw that led us to remove Chris was the way that employees had reported that they were afraid or they felt intimidated. We also saw that in his interactions between Judy and Aaron. He had that personality of really being an intimidator and abusing his power. So we felt like this would allow us to start to build those core ethics for Helping Hands. And then lastly, we wanted to continue to build on the organizational culture. We wanted to be intentional in developing shared values and commitment to the employees and the individuals that we serve that really are the mission behind this organization, that are foundational success of the organization and can be modeled and communicated to both volunteers and employees. So by looking at those shared values of guiding beliefs and being able to teach those specifically to our volunteers. So as volunteers are coming into the organization, is being able to effectively communicate the values and beliefs of the organization, and then modeling that across all departments. So we acknowledge that Helping Hands is a clan culture. We feel like that is a strength of this organization. And so with the shared values to help and empower the poor is a good is part of that culture, and a commitment to meet the needs of employees and the volunteers. And then finally, the belief in the sense of responsibility and the commitment to those in need.
Excellent. Most excellent. All right, if you'll go back to your first slide, we'll get to it in just in a minute. One more. That one. All right. We'll get to that. All right. Excellent. And so now we have gone from you can stop your share and we'll start it back in just a minute. We've gone from one theorist, Hertzberg. We've now added a second theorist for culture. So we must move from, in an academic sense, in a disciplined inquiry sense, we've moved from a single theorist, Hertzberg, motivation, to a second theorist, culture. Now, I recommend Dennison. Dennison does culture work, has a survey, does really well. So now that we have two theorists, we now have a conceptual framework for our study here. It's no longer a single theory, now it's two or more is now a conceptual framework, and how they interact together. So we would start with a Dennison culture survey. Now, we talked about on the qualitative side, on the Hertzberg side, we're going to do focus groups. We need something to set up our focus groups. From an academic perspective, this is mixed methodology. We do the quantitative first, we do the surveys first, and then from the results of those are what gives us the questions that we ask in our focus groups. That's how the disciplined inquiry works, how a dissertation works. That's what dissertation is. It's disciplined inquiry. And so it's also how you would work as a consultant. You would go in and you would gather quantitative data through survey. And then from the results of that, that would inform your focus groups. You would have something to work from. That's what we did with Kinder, the one I just showed you. We didn't start with the focus groups. We started with a survey and then we followed up. And so for culture, I like Denison. We use that a lot. You will get deeply involved in Denison later in your coursework. Let me share my screen right quick. And hopefully this will work. There we go. We use it a good bit. And looking at your organizational chart, if you remember it, this is what we give the paid employees from the board of directors all the way down through all the paid employees. We give them a Denison culture survey. That's how we start to try to determine what the organizational culture is. We need to be very intentional in that. And then that's what we use as the basis of our interviews or our focus groups is a validated survey like Denison. We use that. It has 48 questions, has 4 different dimensions. And so we would start with that. Now you say, but volunteers don't get paid. Well, we've got a solution for that too. This is the one we use with volunteers in organizations. We use the VFI. Search for it. Volunteer functions inventory. That's what we use for the non-paid employees in a nonprofit. Right here it is. So again, we now have a conceptual framework. We're working on Hertzberg. We're working on Denison culture. We have 2 different surveys, the Denison one for the paid employees, the volunteer functions inventory for the non-paid employees. We've got Hertzberg, what makes you stay and what makes you go. That should be part of what we do as well. We can do the Hertzberg side when we do our focus groups. We can do that part of it then, or we could do a separate survey, but we got to be careful not to have survey fatigue. So that is how we go about doing this. And so again, in an explanatory design, a sequential explanatory design, mixed methodology, we would start with our surveys, then we would follow up with our focus groups. And so that's where we get this. And then we would go into the things that you talked about. Now, Matt, you talked about, let me stop my share. Move this out of the way. There it is. You talked about ethical piece of it. That's part of the culture is ethical. Now, understanding there are four ethical paradigms: care, justice, critique, and profession. We want to make sure that when we're working on ethics, that we understand we're working on the ethics of profession here. And that's what we're talking about in this area. We can't get into some of these other things. We get too far afield if we do that. So we have to narrow our ethical focus down to the ethics of the organization, which is the ethics of the profession. The other 3 are important, but they're outside of the scope of what we can do working with an organization. And so the ethics of profession, you can do some reading on that one, the 4 ethical paradigms. But again, looking at, if you'll share your screen again with that slide. So we're going to look at this from an operational perspective. If you were a consultant going out working with this company, as just like you will do when you're going to collect your data for your dissertation. If you can share that slide with us again, let's understand. Go back to that first slide. There we go. Looking at this slide, the way that we would go about this, remembering that our conceptual framework is Hertzberg and Dennison for culture. We would do a culture survey with all of these people right here at this level. The board of directors, executive director, finance manager, resource development, assistant director. We would do a Dennison culture with all of these people, except for our volunteers, the actual volunteers. We'd do the VFI with them. And then when we would do everybody on the Dennison culture, except for, again, for the volunteers. We have a separate survey for them. They're not paid. So we have to treat them differently. They're a different group. Then when we went back and did our follow-up work with our focus groups, we'd want a focus group of the clients. We'd want a focus group of the people who are actually being paid, and we can stratify them according to your chart here. We do the same, ask them the same questions. We just stratify them into a different group. And then we do our volunteers. I would do our volunteers, I would do our paid people, and I would do our client system. That would be how we would go about doing this. Now, you say, Dale, that's a lot of work. It is. But if you want a complete picture, you can stop your share now. If you want a complete picture of an organization, you've got to do all of them. The biggest problem that I see is when we go in, it's like the old gag about the elephant. We blindfold a bunch of people and we put them around the elephant and have them touch the elephant, and we have them describe everybody's got a different perspective. And one of the things that we do, and we're terrible about, is we'll only go in and we'll cherry pick the easiest data to get, the low hanging fruit, and we'll generalize that to the entire organization. You got to be better than that. You got to be more disciplined than that. The practicality of this is the last group there. Everything that you do, I'm not being a contrarian at all. You have gone through all these steps, and that's what you got to do. But you got to collect your data in a way that informs all of those different things that you want to do with these people. Again, you need surveys that match their role in the organization. Dennison for the paid people, volunteer inventory for volunteers. That gives you some data to work from. You analyze that data, and from there, that's where you develop your questions for your different focus groups. Again, your focus groups have got to be, you got to have different groups. You got to have employees, you got to have volunteers, you got to have clients. You got to talk to all of them. But that survey work that you did informs those questions that you ask them. You don't just go in and start having a conversation. You've got data, and you can tell them, from our survey, this is what we found in this area. Why do you think that is? And what can we do to fix it? Those are the two questions that you have to ask when you're doing qualitative work. Why is it this way? And the why comes from your quantitative, your survey. Why is it this way? What can we do to fix it? That's disciplined inquiry. That's mixed methodology. That's how you go about being an organizational consultant. That's how you go about writing a dissertation, which is in fact how you go about doing this. And so that's how all this comes together. Your quantitative part and your qualitative part. You have to understand those, and you have to be very thorough and very disciplined in your inquiry when you're going out and working. You can't just talk to one group and generalize that to everybody else. And you can't use validated instruments in an unreliable way. Denison's great, but it's not for volunteers. Volunteer or VFI is great, but it's not for paid employees. Although they're both validated surveys, if you use them with the wrong group, they no longer produce reliable results. And what I see too many times is people, they have one thing that they do because they're comfortable with it, they know how to do it, but they try to use it with everybody. And they don't have a theoretical framework behind them, or a conceptual framework in this case, that tells them what they need to be doing and why they need to be doing it. You can't just go out and just start. You've got to have a roadmap. You've got to understand your business and how how disciplined inquiry works. I've beat that horse enough this morning, but wonderful presentations. And give us context for our theoretical work today, which again goes back to social systems, which is our culture, which is a subset, Denison, and goes back to Hertzberg motivation. Those are our main theorists that we're working with, and I'm going to try to start. Again, we try to identify those as we go and make how you're going to do your dissertation and what you're going to do it in and what you're interested in, how to make that relevant to you. All right. I want to quickly, before we go to our break, we're a little past our time, but I think we're okay. I want to go to my notes on yeah, I'm going to go to my notes on our discussion boards. I want to ask a few questions. Let me share my screen. All right. Out of the way.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
One thing, and I don't know if you'll touch base on this later, but in chapter 6 in the HIT book, on the worker motivation, there are some of the they say that research has not generally supported Hertzberg's 2-factor theory. I'd be curious on your opinion on that, or some discussion around that, because it says that that the theory confuses job satisfaction and motivation, and there's some comments specifically in there that I kind of was interested in just hearing, because knowing both the strengths of those theorists, but also maybe some discussion around where some of the
I highlighted that in my HIT notes.
Okay.
That there are some debates around that. That the debate centers around that was set in a specific time, and that society has evolved and changed since that time. And so that's why I'm very specific in that Hertzberg is not a continuum, and that's where the objections rise, is that people take that to be a continuum, but Hertzberg is very clear, and we're going to have Leslie speak to this in just a minute here. I want to work through this. To understand Hertzberg, you have to understand that it's not a continuum, and people take it as a continuum. It's things that make you stay and things that make you go. That part is not a debate. That's what we need to take from Hertzberg, is that satisfaction is not on a continuum. And too many people want to argue that it is. And so, but if you go by the original, it is not a continuum. I stick to that it is not a continuum. The same things that make you stay are not the same things that make you go. From a leader's perspective, you have to understand that you cannot be a satisfier. You can only be a dissatisfier. People won't just stay if their working conditions are bad. They won't just stay because they've got a good leader. If working conditions, what they have to do every day, doesn't meet their needs, they will go. That's the part of it, that the two sides of the coin. The things that make you stay are not the things that make you go. And it's not a continuum. Modern theorists argue that it is a continuum, that it's a balance. I get that. But I stick to the original notion that we need to minimize the things that make us go and try to amplify the things that make us stay. And so the one that I have circled today, if Leslie's still with us, she's got to leave here just in a few minutes. I'm trying to get to her. Leslie talked in her, let's see, and she talked in her about, in her current organization, she's trying to amplify the things that make college students stay, which is the experience that they have on campus. And I've asked her to speak today about what do you do when you're not in charge in the organization of the things that make them go, which is the academic experience. So Leslie, if you're there, I'll stop my share. And I'm going to ask her to speak to those. I mean, again, under the notion that it is a dichotomy, it is not a continuum. All right, Leslie.
Sure. I would share a couple of things. I do want to also talk about our last discussion board, about changing culture and good leaders, seeing horizon on the change. I wrote in my discussion board about the enrollment cliff that colleges and universities are going to be seeing. And for those of you who obviously work in K through 12, I mean, you're seeing less students that are in high school, less students that are going to college from high school. And so there are more opportunities for students, more colleges and universities, and less students going to college and universities. And so you have to be able as an organization to make those changes. But the other piece to Dr. Lamb's point is you have to be able to keep the students that you have. And in my role, there are a lot of things that are not in my control. We're a Division I institution. The NCAA has made a lot of changes to the transfer portal. And if a student comes and they're not getting the playing time that they want, they can easily transfer. And there is nothing that I can do in my role to help a student realize that they're not going to play for the NFL. So we have lots of conversations with students about that. But I would say I talked very specifically about working with my team to understand that we all have roles in supporting our students. And we have talked about this a little bit, but we have to make sure, especially in the work that I do, that we're providing excellent customer service and understanding that in my business, our students really are our clients. And ultimately, students and parents can receive a bad experience in multiple ways. And one of them is if they go to ask for help at multiple places on campus, and they're either told, well, that's not our office, or we can't help you, or maybe go to this person. And so I work with my staff to very clearly articulate that we're all here for our students. And so if a student or a parent calls us and it's not our office or not our area, we have to do our very best to serve them, whether that's calling that person for them, walking them to the office, whatever that may be. And so it's so important that we're doing that, because ultimately it could be that one experience that could change a student's perception of our organization and could save them. And there are ways to help support a student, again, just thinking through my lens, to be able to understand that Gardner Webb is a space for them. If they're not happy with their athletic time, We have ways to say to them, we have intramurals and club sports. We want you to be a part of that. If they're not happy with their academic programs, we try to work with those students to be able to understand what is, going back to that motivation, what brought you to college. So it could be another program, it could be an off-ramp that we can take them through. And so we really try hard to understand that each of our students obviously are people, they're our customers, they're our clients. And we have to make sure that we are doing our very best to listen to them, to hear them, and to be able to provide intervention as quickly and as thorough and as intentional as we can. So I don't know, Dr. Lim, if that's what you wanted me to talk about, but
Exactly. What I want you to say is that everybody is your client.
yes.
Doesn't matter if it's your particular area or not.
Yes.
Everybody in your organization has to be understanding that our number one goal is retention. We're going to get fewer. The cliff is coming.
Yep.
But whether we get a few or whether we get a lot, it doesn't. We have to keep them.
Yeah.
Retention is our deal. We have to. We can't spread our vision across of Christianity across the Southeast if we don't have anybody to spread it to. Our vision is not just a 4-year degree or a graduate degree. Our vision is to spread Christianity throughout the region, and that's the notion. And you can't spread it if you don't have anybody to spread it to. You get, there's a bigger picture here. I mean, Gardner Webb is service for God and humanity. There's a bigger vision here than just a college or a degree program. And in order to do that, you've got to keep people. You got to get the ones, and it doesn't matter what part of the division that you're in. If you're on the academic side like me, or you're on the student services side like Leslie, it doesn't matter. We have one goal, and we have to do the things that it takes. I'm upstairs in an old building, and people come by all the time. I keep my door open. Students come by all the time, undergraduates. I don't have anything to do with them other than just being the grumbly old man up the corner office. But it's my role when a student comes by, they're looking for something, and my door's open. I can't tell you the number of times I've walked them down to the bathroom. I've walked them down to somebody's office that they're looking for, or try to find them help somewhere across campus, because we're trying to keep them all. That I don't teach them as immaterial. We're trying to keep them all. And one of the things that we all have to understand is retention is everybody's job, and customer service, they're all our clients. It's a holistic approach, I guess, and that's kind of part of the thread that Matt was just talking about, the people who are detractors from Hertzberg. Again, if you understand there are things that make you stay and things that make you go, if you get bad customer service, those will overcome the things that make you stay. That's one of the things that'll make you go. And so we have to be focused on that. And I want to follow up on
Dr. Lane, can I just add something really quickly? Because I think it's really important and to understand in any organization that it also is very dependent upon employee satisfaction. And that's the interconnectedness. So if your staff or your organization is happy in the workplace and they're happy with the work that they're doing, that impacts their customer service as well.
Exactly.
And so, for me, if I feel motivated to do my work and feel good in my work and I feel supported, that's going to impact my ability to help the students. If I don't feel that way, then I'm not going to be happy coming to work. I'm not going to feel motivated. I'm not going to help my client. And that is a huge piece of working in any organization, because you have to feel good and feel motivated about the work that you're doing.
That's exactly it. Kick the dog syndrome. Man gets yelled at work. He goes home and yells at his wife. Wife yells at the kid. Kid's got nobody to yell at, so kicks the dog. the student's the dog in this scenario. If people aren't happy along the way, then they kick the dog. That's exactly the point. And my example of that, and thank you, Leslie, for the setup here, is the DWNF report on the academic side. What's the DWF report? The number of D's, the number of F's, and the number D's, withdrawals that you get from your students. It's directly correlated with how happy or satisfied the instructional staff is. That's the key report on the academic side, in my opinion, that we ought to be paying attention to. Because if instructors aren't happy, if they're not motivated, they don't work with students. They just give them D's, F's, and the students just withdraw. So as the DWNF report goes up, the retention goes down, or the withdrawals go up, or the people leaving go up. And that DWNF report, I would argue, is a direct correlate to the satisfaction of the teaching faculty. You need to be paying attention to those things. What's making them unhappy? Because that they're obviously not serving students. If they're making D's, F's, and withdrawing, they're not serving them. They're not finding a way. I can't always tell you what the answer is, but what I can always tell you is you got to find a way. They're not finding a way. They're not motivated to find a way. They're not happy in themselves, and so they're spreading that. They're spreading that dissatisfaction around. But Leslie's exactly right. Is that if our employees aren't happy, our clients won't be happy. And that goes back again to Hertzberg. Matt, you have a hand raised.
Yeah, in the school system, I think one of the challenges is that our students are ultimately our clients, but the retention component with teachers is a very important issue right now. And one of the things, there's a lot of talk about investing in the human capital of teachers and how we retain them, but I don't hear a lot of real specific guidelines on how each person can do that. And so I really appreciate Leslie's example about how she trains her staff to respond in a way that gets them to the right place. Not just saying you need to contact this person but taking them there. We see that in places like, it's the difference in certain grocery stores you go in, or a home improvement store. When people take you to there, that shows that you care about getting them in the right place. The only comment I was going to make is, and I know, like you said, Dr. Lamb, is we don't have the answers to all of those. We have to do some further investigation. I think one of the things I see is that there's a lot of control within different departments that don't want other I'll just be specific. So in my department, if it is not related to a child's IEP, for instance, right? That doesn't belong to us. We want to keep that in the 504s, or we want to keep that in Gen Ed, or we want to keep that in, those are, and we're often sometimes corrected if we provide any guidance that's outside of our area, and many times encouraged to kind of really stay in our lane. Which I think what I'm hearing from you all is that is not the right approach.
No,
so
that's what, specific, pardon me for interrupting you, but specific to you, that's what intervention MTSS is all about, but it's everybody's problem. School systems in North Carolina have added a requirement for a 90 before the 90. Leslie, thank you for being with us today. Leslie's got a commitment today. We do a 90 before the 90 now. What does 90 before the 90 mean? When a child is having academic or behavioral difficulty in a public school, they're referred to the school intervention team. And there's a 90-day before they can be tested for exceptional children's program. Well, in North Carolina, we've had a 90 before the 90. So the intervention team does 90 days anecdotals and interventions before the 90 for the placement. So they get 180 days now. But it's bigger than that. It's now the notion that these children, that they're everybody's problem. That it's not just silos anymore, that the intervention team is a school-based committee, what the state calls an SBC, school-based committee. That means that it's the school's issue. It's not the exceptional children's department anymore when a child's not succeeding. It's the entire school's role now, and the principal's in charge of that, which means that everybody's got to be involved. That's the whole purpose of MTSS. It's nothing new. It's the same 90 before the other 90. But it is new and different in that we're now telling folks, a child not being successful, who is our client, is everybody's problem, not just the exceptional children's department. That's the whole notion of MTSS. But Matt's right. We've been in silos for since the mid 70s, when Public Law 94-142 came in 75. In 1975. We've been in silos where when a kid wasn't doing well in school, oh, that's the EC department's problem. That's not our problem. But it is our problem. The school is responsible for the child's academic growth and success. And the thing that MTSS does is make sure that everybody, including the administration of the school and all the teachers, understand that if this kid's not it's not being successful at our school, it's our problem. It's not their problem. And that's the notion. Now, to get back to and thank you for bringing it up. That's wonderful. I mean, that's the idea here, is we got to break down those silos and those barriers, and we've got to do that across. But back to the human resources, Lonnie had a really good one. I like what she had to say about that. When we're talking about trying to keep our teachers and trying to facilitate them and work on their satisfaction and their staying, what is your district doing? I mean, they can talk about we value our teachers, and they can give them a shirt every now and then, that kind of stuff. But that's just symbols. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I was real big at that when I was a school leader, when I was a school principal. I did the swag and did all those things. But that's about all you can do at the local school level. But at the district level, if you really value your teachers, and Lonnie spoke to this specifically. The superintendent sent her a birthday email, and that's wonderful. And again, that's all part of that symbolism. But what are you really doing? And so she spoke specifically to, not being able to get special ed teachers. Well, here's a notion, and I asked this week so I would know. You can do a 12-hour add-on and get certified in exceptional children, but 12 hours at $600 a credit hour, that's pretty expensive. It's $7,200 plus fees. It's about $9,000 to add that on to your license and get into that area. Well, if you really wanted special ed teachers and you really valued your employees and wanted them to do well and to actualize and have their needs met, wouldn't you pay for that? Of course you would. I mean, that would be the thing that you would do. It's 12 credit hours. Doesn't sound like a lot, because I asked the lady in charge of that this week so I could have some specific numbers. And she said it's not really hard to do that. It's just the cost that prohibits teachers from doing that. $9,000 seems like a small investment to me. I mean, you're out recruiting people. I mean, how much are you paying recruiters to try to get your teachers in? Here's a better idea. Take the people that you've already got, invest $9,000 in them, and grow your own. I mean, you got people who would do this if somebody would pay for it, but that's a big investment for teachers, no more than they make. And so I just got through with a project with Gaston County Schools where they need some school administrators. Well, they encourage people to get in school administration programs. I run the one for Gardner Webb. It's expensive. For first-time master's students, it's $22,000 to get their principal license. For people who already have a master's degree, it's $14,000. We do an abbreviated program for them. That's a lot of money to teachers. So we did a partnership with Gaston where we covered half and they covered half, and we got 14 classroom teachers that got a free master's degree. 12 of them are already in administrative roles. One is went to the Department of Exceptional Children, and one is in a quasi-administrative role at the middle school, became an athletic director, but he will be an AP next year. But we've already placed all 14 of those, which has alleviated their problem with not having people, who in the assistant principal role. We're going to hopefully grow them into principals. Now we've got another project going where we're accelerating 10 APs to get them ready to take on administrative roles due to upcoming retirements at Christmas. We're going to place 10 of those. But the district is paying for that. They're serious about, meeting the needs of their employees. They're doing more than sending them a shirt. So the notion here is on human capital is if you really value these people, you will grow these people, and it's not cheap. You have to invest in them more than just a logo shirt. You have to invest in their growth and development, their education, whatever it takes to get them from where they are to where they need to be. That's one of those things. Barry spoke specifically about different people at different phases of their career or their age having different needs in the organization. He spoke about the difference between young and old. That in his organization, the church, that they're having to train people, that the older congregation has a different need than the younger congregation. Now, but the notion here is you got to invest in the people. You got to train the trainers. You got to train people how to go out and work with these folks. Again, you got to invest in human capital. So Barry, I'll let you pick up with that with your argument on you got to do professional development retreats, those things, and train people the difference of the clients that they're working with.
Well, ironically, every year reportedly we do leadership retreats throughout the year, but then for the general, for that includes the staff as well as the volunteers, but then once a year in October, we do one for the staff. And so that's actually this coming Friday. And so there's a time of vision casting, and it's a time we look at what we've done well and what we need to improve upon. So just to give you a little bit of background, the church I attend is 149 years old, and it was started in 1874 by, of course, former slaves. And so there are a lot of families in the church who have been there for generations. And so there is this sense of entitlement on some sides where they don't feel like they have to adjust to the times. And then there is this other group, that the newbies that are willing to explore new ideas, new innovations. And so it's really about bridging the gap between where the organization has been and where the organization is going. And so one of the things that we've had to do over the years, I've been there for 12 years now, is look for ways to bridge the generational gap, because of course the upbringing is different, the cultural values are different, and so we've had to find ways to bridge the divide. And so one of the ways we've done that, we've catered to the older people, so they're more about events that speak to them. For instance, health initiatives. So we started doing that. Community endeavors. We instituted a midday gathering for seniors so they could have a time that was exclusive to them, so they would know that they were valued. And these things made them open up to new ideas. And so they didn't feel like people were taking their turf. Because of course, in the African American community specifically, now I think Darius goes to a multicultural church, which I think is great. But in the African American church, the one place that African Americans have always had the voice has been the church. So there's this idea that this is my place. And so that can be toxic. And so bridging the gap and making sure they have value has been a saving grace, and they've been open to new ideas and to innovation. So from the time that I got there until now, we've seen growth. However, where there's growth, of course, as Bishop Lamb, as Dr. Lamb said earlier, that that growth is not a continuum. It has to be intentional. So you can grow to a certain point and then it can plateau. So we're getting together Friday to talk about really how we can grow, because the reality of it is, and I think this is across the board in most of the institutions, education, religion, healthcare, that there's been a decline in terms of people that want employment or that want to volunteer. And so we're having to work through that. How can we best utilize the people we have on staff without burning them out? Because in nonprofits, the issue that you have is you end up having multiple people doing multiple jobs. And so you end up having burnout. And so those are some of the things we have to work through.
Yeah, that's what the VFI is about. It identifies those things. So Will Kinsey's a little ahead of y'all. Will finish this summer. Will is working in his church right now to identify the things that young church members, 18 to 35 section, what they need by talking with them, by collecting data and talking with them, for the purpose then of putting together an action plan, a professional growth plan for the people who work in the church, to grow them to be able to meet the needs of these people. We have to be very clear here and very intentional. We want to meet the needs of the younger part of our congregation, but we have to be intentional on that. We've got to find out what they need first, and then we have to put together a plan, more importantly, to train our people, invest in our human capital, where they then can go and deliver that to that group. But we just can't say, well, here's what they need. We have to then invest in them to train them to do that, and we do it in a way that's intentional, and we keep burnout in mind. But one of the things that we make the mistake in organizations is, if we know what people need, that's all, they'll just get it. No, we have to be intentional in investing in that human capital. It might cost money, the training, but we have to invest that in them, where, again, the employee that's going to deliver, we have to grow them. And if they're happy, like Leslie said, then they'll be better, that they'll serve the client, because they know what to do doesn't mean that they'll do it. Or sometimes they don't know what to do. And so that's what the training is. So that's really the piece in all of this, is when we come up with in action research, is we have an action plan of how we're going to train the people. We do a professional growth plan. How are we going to train the people that will go in and deliver the services that we need? And the notion being is that's investing in that human capital, that we're growing the people who are doing the delivery. We got to invest in them first before, and then we get an indirect benefit of them working with the client system. But too many times we don't focus on that human capital. We just focus on the client system, and we think if we can treat our people any way we want to, or we can just not grow them, and that they will deliver what we need. It goes back to the Getzel-Scuba model, social systems model, of what we need for the employees to do every day has to be what they need, want, and are capable of doing every day. And if they're not capable, then we got to make them capable. Now, if they don't want to do it, that's a different story. Then we got to get a new ox. We got to get new people. But if we got people who are willing and able, it's our job to make them capable of doing it. That's the whole notion of human capital. We got to grow them into the people that we need them to be. That's what I was talking about. If we need exceptional children's teachers, to Lonnie's point, then we need to invest in them. We need to pay for it. If in Gaston County they needed their employees to step up and grow into leadership roles, then they paid for it. The whole idea is the schools needed leaders. We had people, but they didn't have the ability to do the leading. They had the desire, they just didn't have the ability. It was our job to put together a professional growth plan to grow them into the employees we needed them to be. We invested in that human capital to get them where they needed to be. That was the notion there. Matt, are you still with us? I want you to talk about Apple and zooming out.
Okay.
That's kind of the next part of this.
All right. Let me reference it real quick.
Dr. Lamb, while he was doing that, you mentioned earlier about care, justice, critique, and profession. What are those called?
4 paradigms of ethics, the 4 ethical
Okay.
paradigms: care,
Okay.
justice, critique, and profession.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, just one moment. All right. So I had the opportunity during our initial team sort of planning for the beginning of the year. My director had went away on a leadership retreat, and they went to Raleigh, where there was an Apple kind of headquarters there, and she brought back some information about the innovative approach that they use to really inspire their teams to solve problems in their problem solving approach. And so what I looked at was that she presented and we were able to discuss is that they have a very specific problem solving approach that was started by Steve Jobs that looks at really kind of zooming in or zooming out, really, rather than kind of zooming into problems, is really sort of zooming out to see the big picture within the organization. And then having some time to really or really specifically creating time to have an intense focus on specific areas. And then kind of walking away from it for a little while and taking a break when you get stuck. And I see that happen in our organizations. We're having executive team meetings, and we get to where we're not sure we're really or get really kind of stuck at a certain point, that it is best to press pause on it and step away, and to also begin not with trying to zoom in, but really zoom out on the bigger picture of how we fit into the school system. And I just noted that there's a shared value of innovation and collaboration within Apple that really has been their way to recruit talented applicants that you can imagine within the tech field, is that you're really trying to draw in those really creative folks and people that want to be on those collaborative problem solving teams and have the opportunity to move forward with some innovative ideas. And so that's been their way to recruit talented applicants. They have more applicants, thousands and thousands of applicants upon certain positions. So
All right.
that was kind of where I saw that evidence.
Okay. 2 things that fit into what we're talking about this morning at this juncture. That extends our conversation. They zoom out. See, what I was just talking about and what Barry was just talking about. We see the problem and we work on the problem, but we don't zoom out and say, why aren't our problem is our client isn't getting this. And we just look at why our client. If we zoom out, we'll say, are our people capable of doing that? Have we trained them? Have we got them where they need to be? Are we getting the right people? What are the needs of the people that we're getting? I mean, we keep stepping one more back. We go back to the recruitment all the way back. If you step back, you see that it doesn't start with our client isn't getting what they need. We go back are the people that we got capable of delivering that, and we step back, are we getting the right people? And then we step back from that is what do we value in our organization? Creativity, innovation. That we keep stepping back till we get to, oh, we didn't get the right people. That's why we're not getting the client service or the product that we needed to end. We didn't get the right people, and we didn't get the right people because we didn't know what we valued, or we picked people that didn't value what we valued. That's the whole notion of taking a step back. That's the whole notion of when you deliver your action plan at the end of your dissertation, it's going to encompass a plan that if they're not getting what they need, that you're going to either train, or you're going to retain, or you're going to recruit. It goes all the way back to that. If you don't have the right people, don't be surprised if you don't get the product or the service that you need at the end. That's not a them problem. That's a you problem. You didn't pick the right people, or you didn't have the right induction once you got them, or the training, or you didn't have the right recruitment to find the kind of people that had the same values that you had.
Dr. Lamb, may I ask a question?
That's the backing up the big picture part. Yes, sir.
So I think it was, I believe it's in HIT, and he talks about the Container Store. There were a couple other stores, but I know the Container Store was one of them. And they didn't focus so much on the skill set, but they focused more. The skill set did matter, but they were more focused on the qualities, because they figured if they got the right characteristics, they could train them in terms of the skill set they need. So what's the balance there from your perspective?
Well, it starts with, it starts with a system of interviews. And it starts, you need 4 levels of interviews when you're getting a new person, or when you want somebody. The first one is the kind of the cattle call. Do they have the basic skills that you need? The second one speaks to what you just asked me, is the group interview. Do they have the dispositional behaviors that this organization values? And then we go to the third, is the specific skills. Can they, can you run this machine, or can you operate this piece of software? That's your third one. And then the fourth one is the big picture, with, is overall is who you are in your value system, and can you see the big picture of what we're trying to do? And it always should go that way. First is, do they have the basic level? You vet their, basic level is first. You weed out the wheat from the chaff. That's probably a bad analogy, but that's the whole notion here, is you can't, they've got to have a certain level, or a basic level. Do they fit the criteria? That's what the first level interview system is all about. The second level is that dispositional soft skill, emotional intelligence, communication, conflict resolution. What you're talking about, the type of person they are, we generally refer to that as their dispositional behaviors. That comes second. Doesn't do, we say, well, that's very important. Yeah, but if you can't, if people don't have the base level of skill, then there's nothing you can do to make them successful. Base level skill comes first. Dispositional behaviors comes next. Then specific skill set, drill down. Now, what you're trying to find at that point is how much induction and training you're going to have to do. They may be great, they may not be, but you're trying to assess how much work you're going to have to do with them at that point. And then finally is the big picture. Can they see, the vision, mission of the organization? Does that fit with who they are? It always goes that way if you're going to be successful. And again, that third level, that specific skill, that doesn't mean, when I work with students on interviewing skills, that doesn't mean that we're not going to employ you because you can't run this particular piece of software or this learning platform. But we need to be able to assess where you are, and if you'll be honest with people about where you are. Do you know what you don't know? But you need to work on it, and that you will get trained immediately, and those kinds of things. But back to your original question, it's number 2. It's number 2 in the process. If they don't have the dispositional behaviors, you don't go any further with them. And again, at each level, at the first level, if you don't have the basic qualifications for the job, if it requires a license or specific training or specific experience, if you don't have that, then we can't proceed with you. And then if you don't have the dispositional behaviors, it's a lost cause. If you don't have those. And then at the third level, it's not about weeding you out, but it's about how much we're going to have to spend investing you time-wise, and what we're going to have to do till we get you up to speed. And then at the fourth level is do you share our values, and do you share? Can you see the vision and mission on that? Can we project you down the road as somebody who would stay and lead in this organization? No matter what you're hiring them for, can they be empowered to lead from where they are? And it always goes in those 4, always.
That makes sense.
Let me share this with you. I won't go through the entire thing. I'll just show you one document specific to what you just asked me that we use. Let me get that out of the way. Right here they are. Emotional intelligence, work ethic, positive attitude, communication skills, time management, and self-confidence. Those are the things that you're looking for in terms of dispositional behaviors. That's number 2. That's what you're looking for when you're hiring somebody. Self-confidence, time management, communication skills, positive attitude, work ethic. And overall, their emotional intelligence. That's what we're looking for in those, and so Barry's question from here, how important is that? It's very important. It's the first thing that we look at after we determine if they have the basic qualifications for the job. We can't take a nice person that doesn't have a teaching license or a nursing license or something like that. That part has to come first. We can't stick them in an exceptional children's classroom if they're not certified. If they don't have a teaching license or whatever. So that's your first level. Do you meet the basic qualifications? I think back to the TV show. My wife watches TV Land a lot. King of Queens. Her father-in-law applied for a head of pediatrics at a hospital. He didn't even have a college degree, much less it was a medical doctor. That's what we're talking about. The looky-loos, the people who liked the hours or the money sounded good, showed up, 0 qualifications for the job. You have to have a system that separates the wheat from the chaff. And then once you've done that, very next thing, the very first thing that you're looking for is those dispositional soft skills. That's how important it is. And so when I train people who are doing interviews and who are looking for people, I spent a year with Gallup learning to do the qualitative work. But when we're doing this, when I'm training people to staff, dispositionals first, after we separate the wheat from the chaff, that's the number 1 thing we're looking for. Is people with those dispositional soft skills. It doesn't matter, how smart they are or what they have. If they don't have a good work ethic, if they can't communicate, they can't get along, if they're, somebody mentioned, I caught a phrase this morning, if they're passive aggressive, we're talking about Judy from the case study. She was passive aggressive. Well, we don't want those in our organization. Do they have, that's simply a lack of emotional intelligence. People ask me, when people don't have emotional intelligence, what does that manifest itself as? Passive aggressive behavior. It's exactly what it manifests itself as, and that's why it comes first. If you don't have people who have emotional intelligence, they'll be passive aggressive. Ooh, that's awful in an organization. And then we're looking for communication, time management, work ethic, responsibility. We're looking for those kinds of things after that. Then we look specifically at your skill set. What gaps are we going to have to fill in? And then we're looking to make sure that you're a good fit in terms of your understanding our vision mission. Back to our case study this morning with, what was his name, Gary? He didn't understand the vision mission of the organization. He failed at the last step. He didn't understand that it wasn't about making money. It was about serving people. He didn't get our vision. And so he wasn't fulfilling our mission because he didn't understand the vision that we're not there to make money. Yeah, that's part of it. We got to, but our overarching vision was to help people in poverty. And what he was doing was completely contrary to the vision of the organization. So yeah, that's how that goes. Gary talked about TROSA. Gary, are you with us? I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, I'm here. And so, so TROSA is actually located in Durham, North Carolina. I think they also have a campus in Winston, if I'm not mistaken. Winston or Greensboro, North Carolina. And so TROSA is a nonprofit. So they do rehabilitation. They do rehabilitation for addicts, and they also do mental health. And so just like Helping Hands, they have a thrift store that they earn revenue from, and they also have a lawn care service. They also have like a small like mechanic shop as well. And so the whole idea around TROSA is not only rehabilitation, but also part of the rehabilitation is to also teach adults life skills and those, I guess you say, those trade skills. And so when you enter TROSA, you have to go through the program. Within the program, you have to have you either find a job or learn a trade. That's the deal. And so whether the job is by yourself or through the TROSA program, but they also allow you the opportunity to learn how to be a mechanic, work on cars and things of that matter, or you could work for the lawn care service, or you could work at the thrift store. Oh, they also have a moving company. That's what I was missing. They also have a moving company as well. And so when I was reading this case study about Helping Hands, it just instantly reminded me of TROSA. Same type of ordeal, everything, just a different name. And so it really hit home because I worked with TROSA as a funder. And so they also kind of had the same kind of problem, but not to that extent. It was more so of just bringing everyone together and stop operating in different silos. And so it's something that's prevalent when you have so many different moving parts and in so many different locations, because TROSA's their rehabilitation I guess you say department is in like by 15501, like going toward Chapel Hill. And so their thrift store is nowhere near that. Their lawn care service headquarters is nowhere near that. They're all spread across Durham, North Carolina. And so you kind of have that separate silos because of the distance, but also you got to remember that because of the distance, you're going to create those kind of cultural barriers in which kind of clash when you're trying to bring everyone together. And so they actually started to have those they actually started doing things together, especially those volunteer opportunities that TROSA does often. They I think once a month they do that Durham Habitats of Humanities program as well. And so they're still working on it, and it's not like oh, this is the problem, let's go fix it, tomorrow's done. No, it's an ongoing process. And so I think the same thing with Helping Hands, it's going to take a minute to break down that barrier, but it's an ongoing effort.
Mm-hmm. And so what I liked about what Gary was talking about here is again the silos trying to flatten the organization. And sometimes, and I'm glad he mentioned this, the barriers are geographical. You're not in the same place, you're not in the same building, out of sight, out of mind. And that's one of the problems in the school business when you get to the central office is that you have all these buildings scattered all over, and you're trying to get some consistency, and you're trying to work with people, but they're not all in the same location. They're different offices, different buildings, different places. Same way with these things. And that's another barrier to the success of trying to flatten an organization. If you're not on the same hall in the same building, it's kind of tough to do that. And that's one of the barriers that you have to have. And so you have to have a time where you convene and you bring everybody together, physically together, either on, I guess we do a lot of it, and we can do it virtually, but it's not bad every now and then to physically bring people together so that they understand that they're a part of the same organization, even though they might be located in different buildings. And that's kind of the point of what Gary's trying to make here. It's really hard when you have different aspects, different things that you do, and they're not all located together. Now, to summarize this one, we're going to go to Brenda. And the question that she poses is what is human? When we talk about human capital, we talk about organizations, we talk about growing our employees to get them where they need to be, getting the right employees, Colin's metaphor, getting the right people, get them on the bus and get them in the right seat. Brenda's question this morning that she poses to close out this segment is what is your human resources department? What is their role in all of this? Brenda, talk to us about that.
Thank you, Professor Lamb. When we talk about human capital, basically I'll want to give an example of my organization, which is the university. And as we keep on learning, I'm keeping on growing and relating to the challenges that we are facing as a university in terms of growing the human capital. Of course, like any other organizations in my country, we have budgetary allocations that are allocated every financial year to assist employees in growing their careers. And apparently you'll find that once these allocations are done, at the end of the day, they are not even implemented. For example, an allocation will be done, but when they are doing their priorities, the funds are transferred to cater for any other project. And so our human resource department, basically, we have the human resource policy in place that facilitates career development for employees in the institution. However, as much as we have the human resource policy in place, it has not been basically facilitated or followed, because at the end of the day, you'll find that the allocation has been done, yes, but employees are not able to proceed for training, just to capacity build them. Like for example, I'm currently doing my PhD at Gardner-Webb University. The policy states that the university is supposed to facilitate me for my 3-year program, that is the paid leave, because we have different kinds of leave. But because there were no finances for me to do so, I decided to take unpaid leave. And so when I take unpaid leave, I'm supposed to facilitate my own studies being here. And so apparently the policies are in place, but they are not basically being implemented because of the financial challenges that the institutions are facing. So it is a challenge and even a wake-up call and a takeaway home that for any organization to be stable, for any organization to grow, we need to have the human capital built, because if people are not being developed, then work will not proceed. So I appreciate the fact that we have the policies in place, but however, the policies are still not being implemented to the latter. As much as they are there in place, they are not being implemented. Thank you.
And that kind of concludes this section, and that's a wonderful summation. It doesn't matter what policies you have. If they're not being implemented, it's not going to happen. And so from a human resources perspective, we have to understand those fidelity checks, those formative assessments. Are these things being done? If they're not being done, then you're not going to grow the people that you need. And they won't be able to grow and keep up with your organizational needs and changes if you don't grow your people. And that's kind of the summation. That's kind of the bottom line on human capital. You don't always get people who are, I told you, I've hired a lot of folks. I hired one teacher in my whole career who came in ready to go. One. But we had to grow the rest where they needed to be. I'm talking about beginners. I hired one that was ready to go out of the box. One. I probably hired 300 or 400, and I got one. We had to grow the rest of them where we needed to be. You're going to be lucky to have one in your career that comes in. Your job as a leader is to understand human capital is the most important thing in delivering whatever you're delivering to the client system, and that they're not going to come in, that you can't expect that they're ready to go when they walk in the door. That you that's why I said that third level interview is when you determine how much, where I need to start their professional growth plan. Where am I going to need to start it? Because don't assume that they're going to come in with everything that you need. The third level interview is for you to determine, for this person, if I hire them, where do I need to start their professional growth plan? And how much is it going to cost, and how much time? What's the most important piece? You know, for a school administrator, are they certified to do teacher observations? They got to do that by state law, and they got to do them on a schedule. Have they been trained to do that? So one of the things that we did when we worked with that group from Gaston County is we made sure that we, when they got to their curriculum semester, we spent 2 hours rather than 1 hour. We did 1 hour of class for curriculum. We teaching them differentiated instruction, all those things. But we did an hour of NESIS training. So when they came out of the program, they were certified to do by North Carolina standards to do teacher observations. They were ready to walk into the role that day, rather than taking 6 months or a year to get that certification and not being able to do those observations and help. We made sure that that was part of their training. Cost money, but you know, they were ready to go. But that's what we're talking about. That third level interview, you're trying to determine what professional growth plan is going to be for this person to grow them and get them started where I need them to be. You cannot assume simply because we've got policies in place that it's going to happen. You got to be following through and making sure that training happens. When we talk about moving to our next one, great leaders, I want to call on Matt, who desires to lead his own nonprofit or private. And in terms of the great leader material, he's talking about trying to learn what he's going to need to know to be able to lead those things. And so, Matt, I'll start out with you. What have you found out in your reading that you're going to need to be able to do to be a great leader, to lead your own organization?
Well, I have had the opportunity. I was presented with an opportunity to be on a personnel committee for a nonprofit called Cakeable. And that's really where I started to get interested in the potential for doing something like that, because my passion has always been around serving individuals with disabilities. And over the years, I've gotten more and more interested in employment, purposeful employment for adults after they leave K-12 education, and really looking at post-secondary outcomes. So one of the things is learning how to, as you had mentioned, Dr. Lamb, earlier, is you have to have a vehicle that allows the funding to fulfill the mission, right? And I'm not sure what that is. That's something I spend a lot of time praying about and thinking about. But one of the things I've learned with being on this personnel committee is it takes a lot of different folks with different types of expertise to bring it all together. Within Cakeable, what they do, I'll tell you a little bit about them, is they are a training they're an organization. They've got partnerships with really large companies like Coca-Cola, Bank of America, as well as a company called Canteen, which is the largest food service employee provider in the country. Internationally too. So they supply people that work in food services in airports in lots of different capacities. sports arenas, all those kinds of things, right? Hospitals. So they have partnered with some people that started some other nonprofits using cafes like bistros and stuff like that. So there's one in Winston-Salem called Moji's, and then was another one. Even they started with a clinic that creates scholarships and stuff like that for families to have their kids there for therapeutic services, called ABC of NC, which is in Winston-Salem as well. Anyways, all that to say that it takes a lot of people that have both HR experience. It takes people that have know the business side of how to make this organization successful. So, having Dr. Naeem talked about this, like you have to have your operations people, you've got to have your visionaries. You can't do it with one or not the other. It has to be both. To be both.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Great leaders understand that they can't do it themselves, but that they can't hire everybody that looks like them and has the same skill set. And that's one of the things that we do, unfortunately. We hire people who vibrate sympathetically with us. That's an old school term, that are like us or have values or personality traits or skill sets like our own. When great leaders understand that there's a lot of different facets to the organization, and you have to hire people with different skill sets than you have in order to fill in those gaps. That's the whole notion. You can't just hire everybody the same. There's too many different people. I mean, you need some people who sit around and think. That those visionary people, where we're going to go, what we're going to do, that can read data and know what's going to happen next, kind of predict the future. You need those people, but you also need operations people who can put that theory into practice. That visionary piece has to be employed. Doesn't do any good if we can't operationalize it. Now, I'll use myself as the bad example here. One of the things that I do at Gardner Webb is I do all the prop bets. We don't actually gamble money, but we do prop bets all the time based on data and observations, kind of where things are going and what they're going to do. We do it, just as a hoot at lunchtime or whatever. But, if you think about it, you need people in the organization that are paying attention to the data and are paying attention to conditions that maybe can kind of see into the future. Where you're going to have to go, what you're going to have to do, those kinds of things. I mean, what I'm saying is we just do it to have a hoot at lunch, but you need people in the organization where you formalize that are thinking ahead, that are collecting disparate pieces of quantitative and qualitative data that kind of lead them to where they are. Leslie kind of talked about the enrollment cliff that's coming. And so we need people who are going to try to figure out where do we pivot as a private liberal arts Christian university. Where do we pivot for enrollment? What are we going to have to do? We're working on retention right now. I'll do this part for her. We're going to have to pivot. Yes, we're working hard on keeping the ones that we've got, increasing the satisfying things and decreasing the dissatisfying things. We're working on that retention, but as she said, the cliff is coming. That happened due to the economic collapse of the United States of America in 2008. People who didn't have kids, and it's not bounced back, by the way. The cliff is real. We're going to get considerably fewer high school graduates in 2008, 15. In 2025, mean, it's going to be a sharp in 2 years, sharp decline in the fall of 25. There's going to be like 40% less kids coming to college. I mean, it's a ridiculously high number.
Dr. Lamb, why is that?
Birth rate. Again, when the economy collapsed in 2007, 2008, people couldn't afford to have kids. It's pretty simple. It's not, even I can understand that one. That's one of the things that we don't talk about enough in our society is the century actually changed in 2007, 2008. When we look at history, we go from this century to that century. They don't always break cleanly right on those years. This century started in 2008. The whole financial paradigm changed. And not only is there a cliff in terms of 2008, the birth rate, but it fell dramatically, but it has stayed down because the world has changed. And it has shaped, what is it? Was it Gen Z? Is that the newest ones? I guess it has shaped how they view the world as well. They don't value the same things that people even one generation or two, or like me, 7 generations older than them. They don't value the same things. And so that's why you see different businesses going out of businesses, because they don't value the same thing. And they value things differently, and they put their money and time in different things. But also what happened during that time is the birth rate fell because people, couldn't afford to have kids, but it's kind of stayed low because people don't want, the economic model has changed. And so I'll give you for example here. Women coming back to work after their first child, that's way down. If they are 31 is the number. If they're 31 years old and have their first child, it's 50-50. The probability is 50-50 that they'll come back to work after the child. If they're less than 31 years old, probability is only 30% that they'll come back. Now, if they're older than 31 when they have their first child, probability is 70%. But the notion here is the majority of women who have their first child are less than 31 years old. Only 30% of them are returning to the workforce because of the cost of daycare, childcare. That's new and different. The number of people having kids is way down, but it also that affects colleges on who we get, but it also affects people in the workforce. We're not getting, that's one of the reasons why we're having a labor shortage now. For years, women were just assumed to be part of the workforce, just like men. That's not the case anymore. Many of them are staying home because of the economics of why would you go to work and leave your child with somebody else if it costs you as much as you're making working for childcare? And so that's a part of this as well. That part of society has changed as well. But understanding colleges, you say, well, Deol, most specifically, the low birth rate and continued low birth rate is going to hit smaller liberal arts colleges. Because our kids, the undergraduates that come to a place like Gardner-Webb, are not the kids who are going to be engineers. Most specifically, those kinds of things that are looking for a more practical education that leads to a specific job, that specific training that has a license to go with it, like professional engineer's exam or teaching, whatever. The kids that come to Gardner-Webb are more of a general type. There'll be a lot fewer of those coming in 2025. We've already seen the decline over the last 10 years in the number coming, but it's really going to be it's really going to be an issue in 2 years. And so one of the things that I hope that we're doing is figuring out how we're going to pivot. Right now, we're working on retaining the ones that we've got, but we're going to have to pivot with our recruitment And it can't just be the recruiters. It can't be about the salespeople. It has to be about the people who are delivering the product once they get here. Do we have the programs that they want? It won't matter about, food service and dormitories and those kinds of things and grades and all that are for the students you already have. Trick is what are we going to do to market ourselves? What programs are we going to have? What degree tracks are we going to have that will attract students, will resonate with what students want? Again, all the things that we've talked about this morning or that Leslie and I talked about, those are the people we already have. The issue is going to be we're not going to have any people. What are we going to do then? It won't matter how good the food is or where they eat it or what programs, intramural sports, any of that if you don't have any students. And so our organizational outlook, where our vision's got to be right now, where we've got to be able to just step back and see the bigger picture is what programs do we need to offer? Do we need to continue with museum studies? What is it that we can offer? You can say, well, healthcare is big, but you understand that we don't control the number of seats over in the nursing or the PA program. The nursing board and the PA board determine how many seats you get. So it's not like, we can go out and bring in 400 nursing candidates next fall. We have a limit on the seats that won't change. And so we could say, well, take your most successful programs and expand those. Doesn't always work that way. You're going to have to find something new. For me, I have the largest graduate program, but my problem is I'm confined by what the state will license. Again, we have a state licensing board. I can't take everybody that comes along. They have certain requirements that they have to meet. And those requirements are getting more and more restrictive. And as that happens, it hurts enrollment. But I can't expand it. I have a specific, just like the nursing board. If we're going to license these people, this is who you can take, and this is how many you can take. I'm bound by those same things with DPI rules. How many I can take, and what the qualifications are of who I can take. We can't. A lot of our biggest programs, we can't do any more with them. We can't maximize them anymore. And we see the number of students wanting liberal arts has fallen off a cliff already. So what are you going to do? I mean, where are you going to go next so that you can bring them in? Well, part of it is can we depend upon the what we call the client experience? Will that bring students in? Part of that's the facilities you have and where you're located. Now, High Point University's been very successful in marketing themselves as a life skills university, which is basically client experience. But they have a beautiful campus, beautiful buildings there, located in an urban area where kids want to be. Gardner-Webb has none of those things. We don't have beautiful new buildings, and we're not located in an urban area. We have one stoplight right in front of the president's office, one in the whole town. We have one stoplight in Gardner-Webb, in Boiling Springs, one. Within a mile of the campus, you're out in the country, and I mean cows on the side of the road, chicken houses within 1 mile. We go over to Hamrick's and go by the pasture or the chicken house, or in any direction within 1 mile, you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally the middle of nowhere. There's a few stores right there collected right in front of the university, one stoplight, and that's it. It's literally a one stoplight town. So the location is not drawing undergraduates. The local community is not for people their age. There's nothing to do. I mean, nothing to do. The university is it. And so what are you going to do? You better have people, to Matt's point, you better have people different than you, different perspectives, and that can feed each of your parts of your organization, but more importantly, can see the future and what you're gonna need, not just what you need right now, but what you're gonna need in the future. That's it's big. If you're going to stay viable in an organization. So thank you for that. I was going to have Leslie speak to, we've already hit upon it today. She's working on the what makes students happy side. She does student services, what makes them happy. The problem is that she has no control over the side that makes them go, which is the academic side. She talked about playing time. Yep. She can't fix that either, but you know, that's on the student services side. But there's other things that you can plug in. But there's nothing, if you're not having academic success in a college, there's nothing else we can plug in. If you're not getting if you're on the developmental baseball team, you're not getting to play. We've got intramurals you can play. But if you're not having success in classes, there's nothing that we can do to fix that. You know, that's the drawback on that is you know, the whole point of college is if you can't pass your classes, you can't stay. And so great leaders understand that you're going to have to address that part of it with your teaching faculty, and make them happy or get them skilled where they need to be. That segment is you can't just accentuate the positive. Sometimes you have to address the negatives as well. Again, you have to work on all parts of the organization. And I hate to say it, but the academic side is the negative. That's the part that causes the dissatisfaction. That's one of those things that, you know, that's the other side of the coin. That's those hygienes that we're talking about. You know, academics won't be a motivator, but it can be a detractor, a dissatisfier. And you have to work on both sides. You have to minimize those things. And first thing you do is you minimize D's, F, and W's, withdrawals, you know, bad grades. What can we do to, you know, that kids, and we're not talking about grade inflation, just give them grades. What can we do to help kids be successful in classes? We have to work on the negative side. And the academics for college is the negative side.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
Where do undergraduate students for Gardner-Webb typically come from? What are they within state primarily? And if so, what around Bowling Springs?
The majority of students are non-athletes are from within 100 miles of Gardner-Webb. The athletes, which are half of the student body now, basically, come from all over. But they're only there to play sports, and that's what she's talking about. If they don't get to play, they leave because of open transfer now. And so because our undergraduate population has shrunk and the number of scholarship athletes you have stays the same, it's a constant. It's not like that we've added all these extra student athletes that, you know, that they're over 45% of our undergraduate student body is student athletes. That's not because that we've added more of them. It's because the non-student athletes have shrank. Again, and part of that is economic from the region. When textiles and furniture went out in that part of the world, you know, I'll give an example. The school district just immediately to the west of Gardner-Webb, I mean, literally throw a rock on a windy day over and hit Rutherford County because Bowling Springs is hard up against the county line there. In 1980, before the collapse of textiles and furniture, they had 13,000 students in their school district, and today they have 9,000 students in their school district. They've lost 4,000 students. Basically, they've lost a third of their population over the last, what would that be, 43 years? they've lost a third of their student population. Cleveland County is much the same. And so when we draw a circle around Gardner Webb, many of those counties have lost considerable population and considerable number of students. So that's really on that side of it. We draw from 100 miles. Other areas have urbanized, and we have not, and that has hurt. Like in Gaston County, going up to like Catawba County, Hickory, you know, those areas have urbanized and have things that are more modern, and the town is more like what students would want to be involved in. And so those colleges based in those areas have picked up kids that one time would have gone to Gardner Webb, Campbell, Anderson, much more, you know, Anderson College on, you know, one side down in Anderson, South Carolina. They're getting a lot of the students because that's a really growing area. I mean, a lot of things happening down there for young people. Bowie's Creek used to just be a crossroads, and now it's, you know, it's just a suburb of Raleigh. A lot of things happening going on there. Lenore Ryan. All these are Christian universities, by the way. Belmont Abbey, in Gaston County. You know, Gaston County is just, you know, it's just an extension of Charlotte now. Anything you want there. All around us, and so our really that 100-mile circle. Other places have the community around the college has progressed with society in more modern times, whereas Gardner Webb looks exactly like it did when my wife went to school there in the 70s. They still got the same 2 restaurants. And so it looks exactly like it did then. Exactly. We've got a couple new buildings, you know, built a new student center, but it's over at the football field. That's where kids were having to walk over and eat lunch now because the cafeteria's under renovation. But no, the town has probably less stores now than it did 40 years ago. And these other places where these other Christian universities are centered, their towns grew up around them. Campbell, Anderson, Lenore Ryan, Belmont Abbey. Those specifically are wearing us out on either side. And then you have High Point, who got ahead of the curve and saw this coming and said, we're going to become a client experience. It's all going to be about the experience, not about the education. This is going to be about the experience. We're going to build swimming pools that have the most swimming pools on campus. We're going to do 4-star dining. We're going to do concierge. We're going to do maids. They made it all about the experience. They've invested a lot of money in that. And their enrollment has been good. And these other colleges, it's been good, whereas Gardner Webb's has declined 1,000 undergraduates in the last 16 years. We've lost 1,000 undergraduates. We're down to about 1,300 now. So what are you going to do to stop the slide? I mean, in 2 years, it's going to become critical in 2 years, thinking ahead. All right. I think I've got a lot more notes from what we've done, and I appreciate the work that you're doing on your DBs, because that's obviously the basis of what we talk about each time. I don't want to sit and read the book to you or any of those things. I've got some good notes here. We'll pick this discussion up. I've run 7 minutes past my time. I get started, and I prefer to do the 9 to 12, and then we just let you out an hour early for your own lunch. I appreciate you being with me today. Wonderful discussion. Your DBs are good. Your presentations were excellent today. Some notes about what we'll talk about, we'll pick up with next time. Brenda, I want you to talk about talent gaps, diversity of your network. We'll get there. Barry, I want you to explain EQ. Gary, I like the notion about you brought up about abandoning what made you successful. Leading from within, Gary, we're going to talk about empowerment. Brenda, we're going to talk about leadership and failure. Matt, we're going to talk about shadow is the fear of failure. Yeah, some of the things I picked up, I could talk the rest of the week on this stuff. But I love our discussions. I love what you bring. I love reading what you post. And then my challenge is to take notes and try to make it real in a way that it's not just me sitting and reading it. I guess probably y'all would prefer me to sit and read PowerPoints to you than this rambling monologue that we do. But I want us all to be engaged. Leadership is an engagement function. Again, I'm supposed to be the guide on the side. You folks can read. I highlighted the stuff for you. And so this is the way we do that. And so my time is up today. I appreciate you being with me. I'm looking forward. We're going again next Saturday. We'll pick up right here next Saturday.
Awesome.
Any others that we have. This is kind of a twofer. These two are following up on these. And so this is where we'll pick up next week. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Had a
Thank
great
you,
time
sir.
today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Lam.
Thank you, Dr. Nine.
Nice weekend, guys.
Take everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Everyone be safe.